Hello, everyone, and welcome back. I am Christmas. Welcome back to my channel. And today, there's a question I want to pose. And that question is, what actually drives us? Not what we say moves us, but what does when no one else is watching. Some movement comes from fear, some from hunger, some from wounds that haven't been listened to yet, and some movement comes from love that is steady enough to wait. So with that being said, I'm going to move into the lesson for today. And the lesson for today is driving versus driving force. So sex drive, intention, and how people show up in relationships. There's a critical difference between being driven and being pulled. Most people confuse the two because both can look intense. But the source of the energy is what tells the truth. So section 1, drive, which is internal, integrated, and self-sustaining. Driving or drive comes from within the person. It is self-generated, not dependent on another body, reaction, or response. To stay alive. How drive feels. Calm, steady, and directional. Rooted in choice, not urgency. It is expressed without needing to take. In sex, drive is not hunger, it is presence. A self-driven person can feel desire without acting on it. Does not collapse when desire is not reciprocated. Does not pursue to regulate their nervous system. Sexual energy here is creative, not consumptive. It wants to share, not extract. Section 2, drive, the driving force, which is external, urgent, or compensatory. A driving force is something acted on the person, or acting on the person. This can be unmet attachment needs, unprocessed trauma, ego validation, fear of abandonment, power or control dynamics. How a driving force feels. It feels restless, pressurized, impatient, entitled to response. In sex, this often shows up as compulsion rather than connection. A person driven by a force needs another body to regulate themselves. feels rejected when access is delayed, escalates intensity to override boundaries, confuses chemistry with intimacy. This is not desire, it is relief seeking. And the third part, sex drive versus sexual urgency. Sex drive, the healthy version, arises from embodiment, remains even when alone, does not override values or timing, can be redirected creatively. Sexual urgency, force-driven, spikes with emotional threat, disappears once relief is achieved, feels anxious, not nourishing, often followed by emptiness or shame. One expands the self, the other tries to fill a hole. So in the fourth section, we're going to get into how this shows up in relationships. Self-driven or heart-driven partners move toward connection, not possession. Respect pacing without resentment. Remain sovereign even in desire. Does not confuse access with intimacy. They don't chase because they're already moving. Force-driven partners bond quickly, then destabilize. Confuse intensity with depth. Feel activated rather than grounded. Test limits to reassure themselves. They aren't bad people. No, they're not. Yeah. No judgment. They're not bad people. But they are unintegrated. Part 5. Why this teaching matters, especially now. When awareness heightens, discernment sharpens. You're not being shown past people to judge them. You're being shown them so you can feel the difference in your body. Once you become aware and your discernment sharpens, your system recognizes what feels like home versus what feels like pressure. That's not fear, that's calibration. Desire that comes from drive is generous. Desire that comes from force is demanding. One says, I'm here. The other says, I need to fix something. And then I have a second part that I want to go over. I have a part 2 and a part 3. The second part, it goes over the spiritual as well as the psychological difference on drive and driving force. So I'm going to go ahead and go right into the second portion. Drive versus driving force. So the physical or psychological meaning. This layer deals with attachment patterns, nervous nervous system regulation, trauma responses, motivation and behavior, drive, the physical aspect. It originates from internal regulation. It's linked to secure or earned secure attachment. Desire remains stable under stress. The person can tolerate frustration without collapse. Sex drive here is tied to hormonal balance, embodied presence, self-soothing capacity, and autonomy. Driving force, the physical aspect, originates from dysregulation, is linked to anxious, avoidant, or disorganized attachment. Urgency spikes under perceived threat. Behavior seeks immediate relief. Sexual urgency here is tied to cortisol, adrenal activation, dopamine chasing, fear-based bonding, loss of self-boundaries. The key physical distinction between the two is the body regulated or seeking regulation from another? The spiritual aspect, the energetic transmission. This layer deals with sovereignty versus entanglement, soul maturity, energetic integrity, consent at the field level, drive, the spiritual aspect, life force flowing freely within the being, sacral and heart in communication with one another. Desire moves through the person, not from lack. Union is an offering, not a need. Sex here is creative, co-regulatory, expansive, and honoring of timing. Driving force, the spiritual aspect, is fragmented, life force seeking containment, sacral acting without heart coherence. Desire attempts to plug energetic leaks. Attraction fueled by unresolved contracts or wounds. Sex here becomes karmic, binding rather than bonding, temporarily soothing, often followed by depletion. The key spiritual distinction is energy circulating or leaking. And here's where they meet, the integration point. Wholeness happens where the nervous system feels safe and the soul remains sovereign. When both are aligned, attraction deepens without destabilizing. Intimacy builds without urgency. Desire doesn't override discernment. Love doesn't require self-erasure. This is not repression. This is mastery. And then I have a third section that I want to go over in this same video. And this is tying what I've gone over to the Bible. So, yeah, I'm going to go ahead and dive into this. So, biblical coherence, psychological plus spiritual. The first thing I'm going to go into is internal drive, which is heart-led, self-governed, and integrated. The psychological meaning. Drive comes from alignment values, conscience, love, devotion. A driven person acts from within, not to feel, prove, or overpower. The spiritual meaning. This is movement led by the heart in union with God, not by appetite, fear, or compulsion. And I'm going to go ahead and get into a few scriptures to tie into that. The first one is Proverbs chapter 4, verse 23. Above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it. And the key takeaway here is drive originates in the heart, not impulse, not lack. Then we're going to get into Psalm chapter 37, verse 4. Delight yourself in the Lord, and He will give you the desires of your heart. And the point here is, desire here is not lust. It is aligned wanting. Romans chapter 8, verse 6. The mind governed by the flesh is death, but the mind governed by the Spirit is life and peace. And the key takeaway here is drive produces peace, not urgency or domination. Galatians chapter 5, verses 22 through 23. But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. The key takeaway here is self-control is not suppression, it's mastery. And next, I'm going to get into the external driving force, which is compulsion, urge, unintegrated desire. The psychological meaning. A driving force pushes from lack, insecurity, addiction, or unhealed wounds. This person is moved by something, not choosing from within. The spiritual meaning. This is desire untethered from love, appetites ruling the person rather than serving life. And here are a few scriptures. James chapter 1, verses 14 through 15. But each person is tempted when they are dragged away by their own evil desire and enticed. Then after desire has conceived, it gives birth to sin. And the point here is, desire without governance becomes compulsion. Proverbs chapter 25, verse 28. Like a city whose walls are broken through, a person who lacks self-control. Hold on. Just like a city whose walls are broken through is a person who lacks self-control. And the key takeaway is no walls equal no inner authority. Next I have Romans chapter 7, verse 18. For I have the desire to do what is good, but I cannot carry it out. What this points to is, this describes someone driven, not directed. Next is Ephesians chapter 4, verse 19. Having lost all sensitivity, they have given themselves over to sensuality, so as to indulge in every kind of impurity. And this is numbness masquerading as freedom. Next, I have another section, which is sex drive versus soul-led desire. The psychological meaning: sex drive alone seeks release. Soul-led desire seeks connection, mutuality, and presence. The spiritual meaning: sex becomes sacred when love governs power. And here are a few scriptures. 1 Corinthians chapter 6, verse 12. I have the right to do anything you say, but not everything is beneficial. I have the right to do anything, but I will not be mastered by anything. And for this, freedom does not equal being ruled by urges. 1 Corinthians chapter 7, verse 3 and 4. The husband should fulfill his marital duty to his wife, and likewise the wife to her husband. The key takeaway here is mutual giving, not taking. Then I have Song of Songs, chapter 7, verse 10. I belong to my beloved, and his desire is for me. The key point here is desire expressed within devotion, not hunger. And we're going to get into how people show up in relationships. People driven by drive are consistent, respectful, patient, able to wait, present without possession. People driven by force are intense but unstable, feel entitled, reactive, urgent, consumes rather than cherishes. And here are a few scriptures. 1 Corinthians chapter 13, verse 4 and 5. Love is patient. Love is kind. It does not insist on its own way. And the point here is, love never rushes to consume. Philippians chapter 2, verse 13. For it is God who works in you to will and to act in order to fulfill his good purpose. When drive is aligned, action flows naturally. Matthew chapter 7, verses 16 through 20. By their fruit you will recognize them, not by words, not by intensity, not by desire, by what their presence produces. So I'm not saying desire is bad, because it's not. I'm teaching desire needs a center. I'm not saying control yourself, but I'm saying come home to yourself. The Bible doesn't shame desire. It just keeps asking us, who is holding the reins? Or who is holding the reins? And I will end by saying this. If something in you feels rushed, clenched, or urgent, you don't need to judge it. You can just listen. God is patient with the parts of us that are still learning how to rest. Yeah. And that's all I have for this one. That's all I have. And I want to say, stay curious, stay sovereign, stay educated so you can stay elevated, you know? Because we're all out here learning. We are. And in a way, we're all in this together. So, until next time, you all take care. Later.